How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jason, and in today's video, we're going to be previewing the 2023 Ottawa Redblacks. And as always, starting off by talking about their 2022 season, and unfortunately for Redblacks fans, it was another long one, finishing with a 4-14 record, last in the East Division for the third consecutive season. And unfortunately, going into last year, there was a lot of positive momentum behind this organization. They made a bunch of offseason moves that made you think that this team was going to rapidly improve last year. But at the end of the day, they started off slow, had a really rough schedule to begin the year. I believe it was back-to-back against Winnipeg to open the season, and then another couple of really tough opponents in weeks 3 and 4. And they started 0-4, and then Jeremiah Mazzoli, their quarterback, went down for the season. So that was basically the end of it there, and it just continued to spiral out of control into a 4-14 season. So the Red Blacks are really hoping that they'll dig themselves out of the basement finally in 2023, and let's talk about it. So in terms of their biggest addition this offseason, I could have went with a number of different players, but I went with linebacker Jovan Santos-Knox that they bring in from the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Simply a tackling machine, and was Hamilton's nominee for Most Outstanding Defensive Player last year, one of the league leaders in tackles, and just a guy that brings a physical presence to your defense. I think he's going to be a massive improvement on Avery Williams, who they had starting at the middle linebacker spot for the last several seasons. So at the end of the day, I think Jovan Santos-Knox is really going to give that defense a presence, a force in the middle of that defense, and I think that is going to be a big addition for the Ottawa Redblacks this season. And then in terms of their biggest loss, there are several players that I think that could be felt by this team and not being there next season. But at the end of the day, I went with offensive tackle Cambry Williams, who they lost to retirement. He only played the 1 year there, but I think that he is a very quality offensive lineman that they will miss at the tackle spot. They didn't really bring in too many guys to compete at those tackle spots this season, so I'm interested to see how they fill that role that's left behind by your Cambry Williams. But at the end of the day, I don't think they actually had that many guys that they lost that were quality. So I think at the end of the day, it wasn't the worst offseason in the world for the Red Blacks in terms of losing quality players. And I think that they do add a quality player here in Jovan Santos-Knox. Now let's start talking about this roster. And for the Red Blacks roster, I don't necessarily hate it, but I think that there are some obvious weak points that they really haven't addressed over the past couple of years, and that's why it ranks 9th in terms of offense for me, which is dead last in the CFL. And I think that there are some strengths to this offense. I think that Jeremiah Mazzoli, when he's healthy, can be above average quarterback in this league, maybe the 5th or 4th best quarterback in this league. But at the end of the day, we don't know if he's going to stay healthy. It has been a while, even dating back to his time in Hamilton. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out for them, but that's kind of the least of my concerns with them. I think that maybe the offensive line has some issues at the tackle spot. I think on the interior they're very solid, but I think at the tackle spots, which are very crucial for pass protection, there could be some questions there. I think the receiving core behind Jalen Ackman, there's not a ton of depth there. You have some nice players like Nate Bahar and some other guys that they're really counting on to get more of this year, like Justin Hardy, a former NFL guy. But at the end of the day, I think that's pretty thin at the wide receiver position. And I think that's really where I have the concerns. There's not really a proven running back on the roster either. So you don't have a running game that you can really rely upon. And that's kind of why I have them ranked as the last offense in the CFL. I do think they have the ability to outperform my expectations, but as of right now, with that thin wide receiver room and that really non-existent in terms of experience in the backfield, combined with Jeremiah Mazzoli's health, I have to have them ranked as the worst offense in the CFL going into this year. Now, on the other hand, with this defense, I'm a little bit higher on them. I actually have them ranked as the 5th best defense in the CFL going into this year, and I think a lot of that has to do with the addition of Jovan Santos-Knox. I thought that over the past couple of years, they had one of the weaker linebacking units in the league, and I think Jovan Santos-Knox changes that in a big way. Again, adds a presence to that defense, especially in terms of run defense. I think that secondary is pretty deep. They have a lot of experienced players back there. They do lose Money Hunter to injury in the preseason, unfortunately. There's other players there that could potentially step up, but at the end of the day, that's a pretty big loss for that defensive back room. Honestly, I think that overall, this defense is pretty damn good. You look at the defensive line, there's some capable veterans there. Obviously, you have the defending most outstanding defensive player in Lorenzo Malden, who really carried the load for them last year. From the defensive end spot, but at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty good defense, and I think it has the ability to be a top 5 one this year. Now, in terms of their Canadian talent, I'm a little bit lower on them. I have them ranked as 8th in the CFL, which is second to last. And at the end of the day, I think that there's just the lack of those true difference-making players. I think that along the offensive line is where the strengths are for this Canadian unit. You have a guy like Drew Desjardins they bring in from the NFL. I think he's one of the best guards in the league. I think that, Jacob Ruby had a really good bounce-back season last year. So not concerned with the Canadian talent on the offensive line necessarily, but I think in terms of the wide receivers, there's not really a star there or a guy that's capable of being one of the better Canadian receivers in the league. Nate Bahar is a nice player, but I don't think he's capable of that. I think that on the defensive side, you've yet to see a guy really emerge as a defensive star there as a Canadian. So I'm very interested to see what happens with the Canadian part of this roster going forward. But as of right now, I have it ranked second to last in the CFL. Now moving on to talk about their strengths and weaknesses. How is this team going to win games this year? And how is this team going to lose games this year? So for their first strength, I went with the secondary defensive backs. I think it's a very veteran unit, but there's also some young guys they've added to the mix. I like Hakeem Bailey, who they brought in as a rookie last year at that corner position. I'm excited to see how he grows this year. But like I said, a lot of veteran players around him, so you feel comfortable with this unit going into this year. They also have the defending most outstanding defensive player in Lorenzo Malden at defensive end. Always helps having a game breaker on the defensive side. And then I think the interior offensive line is also a strength with the Canadians they have up front. Drew Desjardins, who they bring in from the NFL, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, going to be a big addition for this team. So I think that interior offensive line may give them the ability to run the ball a little bit more than they have the past couple of seasons. I'm very interested to see what the effect of having them is. And then in terms of their weaknesses, I have the run game as a potential weakness. Despite what I just said about the interior offensive line, this team has really struggled to run the ball over the past couple of years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the running backs that they have back there. Devontae Williams, who is penciled in as their potential starting running back, didn't really show me a ton last year, so we'll see how he does this season. But I think the run game is a little bit of a concern. I also think the red zone offense is a huge issue for this team over the past couple of years. I think that, you look at Jalen Ackman, who's their number one receiver. He excels pretty much everywhere else on the field, but in terms of getting in the end zone, he only had about 2 or 3 touchdowns last year, if I do recall. So at the end of the day, I think having that big red zone target is super essential in football, especially in the CFL. So I think at the end of the day, that's something that this Ottawa Redblacks offense is kind of lacking, and we'll see if it affects them this year. Now turning to talk about the opening to their 2023 schedule, starting with week 1, they're at Montreal. Always a very tight matchup we've seen the past couple of years. Most of the time it's gone Montreal's way, but we saw Ottawa steal a couple of games over the past couple of years in key fashion against them. So we'll see how week 1 turns out. Could be a big game for both of those teams to start off the year. Week 2, they're home against Calgary. Calgary's kind of had their number over the past couple of seasons, so we'll see if Ottawa can get the home win there. Week 3, they have their bye week. And then week 4, they're home against Edmonton, the 2 worst teams from last year. We'll see how much each of them have improved. And then week 5, they're home or away against Hamilton, a game I will be attending. So we'll be interested to see if Jeremiah Mazzoli is healthy for that one, would be his return to Hamilton. And then week 6, they're on the road, at home. I keep getting that mixed up, against Winnipeg. That should be a very tight matchup. They played Winnipeg very, very well last year when Mazzoli was healthy. So I'm very interested to see if they can give them another run for their money in week 6 and finally get a W against them. So I think it's a pretty hard schedule to begin the year for Ottawa. But I think at the end of the day, if they can get a couple of wins, would really build their confidence, especially if they can get that week 1 win against Montreal. Now, in terms of my general prediction for this team this year, I have them finishing between 5 and 10 wins. the floor for this team is still pretty low in my opinion because you have the potential for injuries with the quarterback position. Obviously, if Jeremiah Masoli goes down, I think this season is over again. I just don't trust Nick Arbuckle to play winning football at this point of his career. So I think that could be a major issue. The wide receiver depth is a problem. Just the offensive problems in general could be something that plagues this team and leads them to having another poor season in 2023. But I also could see it working to a degree, finishing with 10 wins. So at the end of the day, I think if they're a good team, I think they might be led by their defense more so, and Masoli having a strong season passing the ball. So at the end of the day, I think that it could go either way with this Red Blacks team, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be one of the powerhouse teams in the CFL, but you guys will have to let me know what you think down below in the comments section. What do you guys think about the Ottawa Redblacks going into the 2023 CFL season? And with that said, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.